even though we'd had that introduction and learned a little bit about I think it was maybe the same day the food bank was here. But we wanted to have you come in and just give us an update on the Universal School Meal Program, which the legislature passed a couple of years ago. During the pandemic, the federal government had extended universal school meals throughout the country. Vermont kept it up on a 1 year basis, I think, 2022, and then we made it permanent in 2023 and 2024. It's come back up, sort of resurfaced in part because it's paid for through the education fund. And along with everything else that is part of the education fund, it is coming under some scrutiny from us as legislators. So just as we looked at current use yesterday, which is a piece of the education fund, this is as well. And then I think even more recently, in the governor's budget, my understanding, and we'll ask Nora to clarify, because as I said earlier, I haven't actually read the budget, but my understanding is the funding may have been removed from the ed fund for this program. So in any case, that's sort of the background. And I won't say anything more, but I'll turn it over to you, and Nora, if you'd like to walk us through whatever you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Durfee, and thank you, members of the House Agriculture, Resiliency, and Forestry Committee, for having me back and to share with you about Vermont's Universal School Meals Program and how incredibly successful and effective it is. And I know that some of you were members of this committee when the Vermont's Universal School Meals Program was enacted in Act 64 in 2023. And I know that some of you are not. And so just please ask me any questions that you have about just even how school meal programs work in general. And I've tried to work some background into this as well. So I'm
sorry, Nora, we have another guest on the agenda. I don't know whether you want to make an introduction or whether we're going to have a separate presentation.
Oh, yes. And I'm sorry, for the record, also, I'm Honora Horton, and I'm the Executive Director of Hunger Free Vermont, and I should have started there. And yes, so Kayla Strom from the NOFA Vermont, the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont, is also here because a critical interconnection of Vermont's Universal School Meals Program is with local food purchasing and the local food purchasing incentive and our farm to school programs. And so Kayla is here as an expert on that, and we'll be doing an additional presentation. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so in 2023, as I just said, the state of Vermont made a commitment to families, students, educators, school administrators, and communities. Act 64 passed with very strong support from all of Vermont's political parties. And that commitment was breakfast and lunch for every student in every school day, in every Vermont public school and independent schools that opt in to add. At no charge to individual students. And Governor Scott allowed this bill to become law without his signature on June 14th of 2023. And prior to that, a 1-year pilot was passed by this legislative body with strong support that tested Vermont's school meals, Universal School Meals Program for a year. And the success of that year then led the legislature to make it permanent. I'm sorry, my computer is being really, yeah. And so then we collectively made a permanent commitment to universal school meals.
Representative O'Brien.
Nora, so that 1-year pilot was federal COVID ARPA money that funded that?
No, it was funded with, it was the same structure as the program is now. It's mostly federal funding and it's a supplement of state funds. in the education.
It was coming through the education.
So Governor Scott is now proposing to repeal the law. So the language, all of the language constructing Vermont's Universal School Meals Program is proposed to be struck in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So what does this mean, though? So this proposed repeal of Vermont's Universal School Meals Program would really cost Vermont kids, families, schools, and farmers a lot. It means 2.5 million fewer healthy school meals served to Vermont kids every school year. 27,000 children and families in the missing middle would have to pay for school meals or pack meals from home, so these are these are children who are living in families earning less than $150,000 a year. So in the group that our own Joint Fiscal Office has said are either not able to afford to meet all of their basic needs or on that, on the cusp of that. It will cost families about $1,500 per child per year to pay for school meals. If you add all of that up at the average cost of a meal in Vermont, and what school meals, what paid school meals would cost if we were charging for them now, which we're not, we're talking about $24 million a year in cost burden shifted to the Vermont families who are not able to afford to meet their basic needs right now, but are not eligible for free school meals. And having a universal school meals program has enabled us to draw down $7 to $10 million a year in additional federal funding for our school meal programs. And as Kayla will talk about after me, quite a bit of that funding is finding its way to Vermont farms as well. So it would, Governor Scott's proposed repeal of Vermont's Universal School Meals Program would stick school districts and schools with the bill, because it's really important. And this is like hard for us to remember, I think, because we actually haven't had the old broken model of school meals since 2019, right? But what was going on back then is that most of the school meal programs in Vermont were in the red every year. They did not break even. They did not have the economies of scale with the federal reimbursement rates to actually cover all their costs and operate under that old model. So school districts were making general fund transfers to their school meal programs every year. And where was that money coming from? From ultimately the education fund and property taxes. So I think it's just really important to say that one way or another, if we want school meal programs to operate at all, we have to pay for part of that. And we're paying for right now in a very equitable, efficient way. And if the Universal School Meals Program was repealed, we would be returning that cost to school districts to manage. And they would have to cover millions of dollars in unpaid debt to school meal programs from families. So these are families who their students would charge for meals under the old system, and then they wouldn't pay for that bill because mostly they couldn't afford to pay for that bill. And at the end of the year, by federal law, that money has to be repaid to the school meal program. So school districts would have to cover those debts. with unbudgeted general fund transfers every year. And before the pandemic, we documented that there was at least $1.5 million in unpaid school meal program debt in Vermont schools. Since the pandemic, in states that have returned to a pricing system for school meals, so who have not created the universal school meals program that Vermont has, unpaid school meal program debt has skyrocketed. There are national news stories about this every week. Just in Concord, New Hampshire, in our sister state, unpaid debt to their school meal program has increased 620% since the COVID-19 pandemic. So even if that didn't happen to that extreme degree in Vermont, even a 300% increase in unpaid school meal program debt we would be talking about $4.5 million a year. And then, as I said, school districts would also have to make planned general fund transfers to their meal programs. Most of them would. And we calculate that that could be around $5 million a year. Then it also, Governor Scott's proposed repeal of Vermont's universal school meals program would cost Vermont kids, families, schools, and farmers all year round. Because thanks to the way that Vermont's universal school meal law is constructed and the new ways that that allows for the calculation of low-income students, it's connected to two other federal child nutrition programs, summer meals and after-school meals for kids. Those are also programs that provide meals for free and with 100% covered by federal funding. And the Vermont's Universal School Meals Act has made dozens of additional towns and communities in our state eligible to operate these programs for the first time. And without that, the way that low-income students are calculated under the universal school meals provisions, those towns would become ineligible again. So we would end up with thousands of Vermont kids missing out on summer meals. And the burden then to cover the costs for those meals when school is not in session would fall back on families.
And else.
Okay, so at the bottom it says additional millions in federal funding for summer and after school meals would be left on the table. I was talking to Representative Teddy.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, from Barry. Thank you. And what is the cost to our ed fund to pay for school meals right now?
For the universal school meals program, 17.5 million.
17.5.
That is 40% less than the original projected cost of the program, I would like to add. So the cost has actually gone down each year. And we are still covering all students in all public schools.
And how much do we receive in federal funds?
Overall, for the entire school meals program, 34.5 million or so.
34.5 million. So we're getting about a 2-to-1 leverage.
Yeah.
And if I understand this correctly, by doing the universal school meals, we're not requiring families to fill out the paperwork to get the federal funds, because now it's done by, I don't know if it's done by the principals of school districts or who, but they use their poverty level indicator and turn that in to get the match money. So serving on the school board for 14 years, the last year we had to retire debt at North Country Union High School. It was $18,000 because people hadn't paid their meals, and the rule was either paid their meals or they didn't walk, and everybody gets fed, and we ate the cost. So, but we also had issues that people would be too proud or just wouldn't fill out the paperwork to get the aid that was available to them. So through this program, that requirement is gone.
So first of all, you should just come and talk about universal.
No, I did-
That was a beautiful articulation from the perspective of a school board member of kind of the costs, right, on the school district, not just financial, but emotional. And, to have to make a decision like, are we going to let students walk in graduation if they haven't paid their meal debt? Or are we going to cover this? Or, how are we going to handle that? So I just appreciate that. I appreciate.
It wasn't a hard decision to make for some of us.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well. Because we don't think that that our kids should ever be put in the position of having to deal with the kinds of challenges raised by what if our families can't afford to cover that debt. So everything that you said is accurate. And as part of the transition to Vermont's Universal School Meals Program, our Agency of Education chose to enter into an agreement with USDA to be able to what's called directly certify students. This is what you're talking about, kind of on the back end.
Thank you.
For to be able to document their income, their family's income levels, for eligibility, to determine their eligibility for free or reduced priced school meals, so that applications are no longer needed for Vermont families. And we're thrilled that the Agency of Education chose to enter into that pilot. I want to say that through that process with the Department for DHEAA, Information Health Access, they were able to document that there were 10,000 low-income students who were eligible for free school meals, who were enrolled in school meal programs, who weren't eating meals because of the kind of stigma and pride issue. And that there were additional 7,000 students identified who were eligible but never were enrolled at all. So, and I also, though, want to say that having that direct certification ability is now, we expect, unless the federal government makes changes, permanent in Vermont.
Representative O'Brien?
I know, so what's the requirement for the federal government? I mean, they're still paying into, depending on how many free and reduced lunch students there are. Is it tied to Medicaid now? Is that where they're getting their data from? Because it used to be more of these forms, but now there's a new process, right?
Yes, you are correct. It is direct certification through using Medicaid data. And the income cutoff is still the same federally set income cutoff for free school meals, which is 130% of the federal poverty level, or reduced price school meals, which is 185% of the federal poverty level. And in Vermont, thanks to previous action by this legislature in years gone by, Vermont has covered for many years, since 2013, the reduced price charge. So all students up to 185% of the federal poverty level have been receiving free school meals. But our Medicaid data allows us to identify nearly all students who are income eligible for free or reduced price school meals without requiring, because families already have provided that data, right, when they apply for Dr. Dinosaur for their kids. So families do not have to fill out an additional school meal application any longer. And that applies to nearly all families and students in Vermont now, which is a huge win for kids and families, for just data privacy for families, with their school districts, and for school administration, because processing those forms is unbelievably time consuming and difficult, and took a lot of school administration and school nutrition program resources away from the real job at hand of supporting students and families and feeding them. So this is a summary of what I've just shared with you on the previous slides, that repealing Act 64 would mean losing $7 to $10 million a year in federal funds for Vermont school meal programs and farms, seeing our participation in school breakfast and lunch plummet, returning cash registers to the cafeteria and shifting staff time from scratch cooking to managing paperwork and entering student codes on computer screens. Each school meal would cost more to make because we would lose the economy of scale of that incredible amount of participation. And school meal program debt and debt collection would return. The administrative burden would increase. We had principals who came to testify when the legislature was debating, enacting this law in the first place. And they said, forcing me to be a debt collector with the families of my students is the absolute worst part of my job ever. So we would be forcing principals to return to that work. And we're talking about a program that is a stunning success. So this is the part where I hope you all can really feel some pride in what got created collaboratively with the Agency of Education, the legislature, including very much members of this committee, and students and families and other advocates. No student has had to learn what hunger feels like in any Vermont public school since 2019. More students are eating nutritious meals than ever before. So we've had a 36% participation in breakfast increase, and a 20% participation increase in school lunch since enacting this law. So that's 2.5 million additional meals. And we've seen our federal funding for Vermont school meal programs increase by 44%. So it's now, that number is 34.5 million, Representative Nelson, that you asked about.
Representative Burke.
So if we receive 34.5 million from the federal government specifically for lunch programs, what is the total cost then of our universal lunch program?
Right, so that's for breakfast and lunch, which is also what our universal program covers. So it's 34.5 million in federal
52.
funding and 17.5 million in state funding.
Got it.
Yes.
Costs 52.
And Nora, may I just ask you to elaborate a little bit on that 44% increase from 2019?
Mhm.
Can you say how that happened? So, and I'm trying to recall, and I may get it wrong, but by moving to a universal school meals program, the federal government increased the amount per meal that it was willing to send to the state. Is that right? Or am I conflating with something else?
No, that's not accurate. The federal government sets one standard price each year for what they will reimburse to states and then ultimately to school districts for each meal served, depending on the income level of the student. So if the student is eligible for free school meals, it's one price. If the student is eligible for reduced price meals, it's a different price. And if the student is not eligible for either of those things and the family would have to pay, it's yet another little bit of subsidy. Why we have seen this dramatic increase in federal funding is that many more students are eating. And so that means many more meals are being reimbursed. And it's not just any students who are eating, many more low-income students are eating. So the balance of which students are choosing to eat meals at school remains as it always has been. More of our lowest income students are eating than our higher income students. Although we think everybody should eat in school because, you know, you have to be there all day long and hungry kids can't learn.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Chairman. Are you gonna talk about the bags that are put together on Friday and packed into backpacks and sent home for some of these kids so they can eat all weekend too?
Mhm.
Cause that tugs at the strings.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know if you have a slide on that, but that's part of it as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a slide on that because that's not part of our Universal School Meals program. So that's part of the charitable food effort that also supports families, because there are many, many families in our schools who are really struggling, and school meals are a lifeline, an absolute lifeline for those families. And I will talk a little bit about who are we talking about when we're talking about the families with kids in
And
our
little
schools.
brothers and little sisters.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Did I sufficiently answer your question, Chair Durfee? Because I could say a little
Well
more.
enough for the moment. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So Universal School Meals has helped many more communities qualify for summer and after-school meal programs that are fully reimbursed by the federal government. So we just hit an unbelievable record this past summer of 1 million meals served to kids in Vermont. We are #1 in the country for the number of kids reached by, low-income kids reached by summer meals. And that is 33.8 million in additional federal funding that was brought into our state to support the summer meals program in 2024. So again, as I said, this is directly tied to this expansion, the identification of so many more low-income students, and the way that when schools are allowed to calculate their rate of low-income students to qualify for these other programs when they are using a universal school meals provision. So, you know, we're reaching kids all year round with school meals, and local food in the, or school and summer meals, and local food in those meals is increasing. And summer can be the hungriest time of the year for families with kids.
Senator O'Brien.
And just logistically, how do kids access those meals in summer? Like, I'm thinking of our local schools are mostly closed down, the kitchens are anyway. So how do they get that food?
Well, there are lots of different sites where summer programming is happening, or even just kids are congregated for summer. So most of the school kitchens in your district are closed down, but there's likely one that is operating as a sponsor of a summer meals program. And so the food can be created at one place and then satellited out to as many sites as that sponsor is willing to cover. And so we're talking about, you know, a community pool or a rec program run by a town. And the food, the lunches, the breakfast and lunches, or snacks and lunches, or however they're parsing that out, that are served to kids, are often coming through this program. So that the rec program doesn't have to fundraise for that food. We can have this federal program cover that cost. And we can create the food kind of in bulk a bit, create these meals and get them out to many, many kids. There's also new opportunities to have families pick up a set of meals once a week. This is really important in our rural, isolated areas, to provide at home for 5 days or 7 days. And then, so it's kind of a pop-up site that operates. So all of that is really facilitated and supported by our Universal School Meals Act. Yeah, so again, and this has really eased the burden on local school budgets for funding their meal programs, and reduced general fund transfers to school meal programs by 37%. And that's even despite, We've had about a 30% inflation in the cost of food that schools have to, these meal programs have to cover in the last couple of years. And families save money. So families with kids are saving $1,500 a year. And I just do want to pause to note that currently the average ed fund taxpayer is paying at most about $30 a year to make the Universal School Meals Program possible. Now that's an average. And so because our property tax system is, progressive, relatively speaking, wealthier families are paying more. They have more valuable houses and they're paying higher property taxes, and lower income folks are paying less. But on average, we're talking about $30 a year for this highly successful program. And I'm going to just, again, make a nod to the virtuous cycle of this expanded school meal programs in what are, the largest food, restaurants, if you will, in every single one of our towns are our school cafeterias. And to be able to leverage that for Vermont farms and our Vermont farm economy is really important. And I know that Kayla is going to speak more about this. And I just also want to emphasize that the administration itself, our Vermont Agency of Education, they just issued a summary report of the key themes from the Listen and Learn tour that the Secretary of Education has conducted over the last year. And they document themselves the incredibly strong support for Vermont's Universal School Meals Program among education leaders, teachers, and the Vermont public. And we asked what students, parents, and teachers might want to tell you about Vermont's Universal School Meals Program. And here's just a few of the many, many, many quotes that we got. I am so grateful for free school lunches. You saved us. That one gets me every time. Every student feels respected at school. I love school lunch. It fuels your brain so you can do better in school. Those are students. 2 promised meals a day. It's a huge deal from a parent. Thank you for helping get my kiddos free meals. Equality for everyone, no one turned away. And from teachers, from educators, food is a basic human need and kids deserve the meals that keep them going. And my students are ready to learn, and all kids have an equal chance at learning.
O'Brien.
Just anecdotally, and maybe this is coming in future slides, what are you hearing from teachers as far as them noticing students doing better because they're getting food a lot?
I mean, that we're hearing this over and over and over again. I have students who are better ready to learn. There's so many challenges and disruptions and mental health crises that teachers are dealing with every day, and to have them in the midst of that still be noticing and saying to us, wow, it's so different when every kid has had breakfast in the morning before they come into my classroom. It makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Representative Burke.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna mention it, when I was a kid, that I went school counselor side. I am getting emotional about this. So we have a kid, it's lunch. We're about 25, not all.
Hmm.
When I was a kid, so.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that's being said.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And I get emotional about this too, because when I started my job at Hunger Free Vermont 13 years ago now, I sat in a cafeteria. I visited cafeterias all around the state, and I sat in cafeterias with students and I talked to them. I was like, tell me about your lunch and what's going on. I was just trying to learn my job. And they said to me, well, I'm free, so I get this. So I'm reduced. I just hope that we're all clear that our kids are smart and they know exactly what is going on. And that is the world that our kids lived in at school before you all passed the Universal School Meals Act. And I don't think we should ever risk going back to anything like that again.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Jim. Our principal a few years ago went to our high school. Great principal, and talked about how ashamed he was to use his card to get lunch because his mother, single mom, raising 2 kids. And I never forgot it. And I just wrote down a little thing. If it comes to the floor, stand up and say, "Let kids eat with dignity and parity."
I could not have said it better. Thank you. All right, so I'm stating the obvious to you all here, but children and youth are at risk of hunger and food insecurity when they live in households that don't make enough income to meet their basic needs, unless their basic needs are met through other means. And that is who we're talking about here. So, and I want to be mindful of Kayla's time. There's quite a number of data slides here, but I'll just pause to say that on the most recent Joint Fiscal Office basic needs budget, compared to the cutoffs for free or reduced priced school meals that the Fed set. And you can see that that cutoff is half of the income needed to meet basic needs in Vermont. Were we to return to a pricing system for our meal programs? So we were talking earlier about how we now know, because we have the ability to directly certify students and identify student income on the back end through our Medicaid data. We know that there are 23,000 students living in that income gap between the cutoff for free school meals and the Joint Fiscal Office's basic needs budget for family, with kids. So that's a lot of kids. It's a big percentage of all the kids who are attending our public schools who would really not be able to afford their meals and not have any way to access the program if the Vermont Universal School Meals program was repealed. And how many kids are we talking about? This is the Census Bureau's data, and I just wanted to show you how many of our kids are living in these lower income families. It's almost all of the school-age kids in our state are living in families with incomes below $150,000 a year. So if you add all that together, 80% of the students we're talking about are in that category. They really need these meals. The vast majority of students in our schools and their families rely on these meals. And so only Vermont's Universal School Meals program, like the one that we've designed, can deliver all of these benefits, reaching all food insecure students, taking cash registers out of the cafeteria, eliminating stigma, eliminating unpaid meal debt, reducing paperwork and costs, allowing staff to focus on preparing scratch meals and offering attention to students, and ensuring all students are well fed and ready to learn. Vermont's commitment to feed students breakfast and lunch every school day has made a huge difference for students, families, teachers, school administrators, and communities. We should reaffirm our commitment now, not take it away when it's working so well. This investment is less than 1% of the education fund, and it means that every student will be well nourished and ready to learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Representative O'Brien.
One thought, for context, have you ever looked into like your stat on it costs $30 for the average Vermont taxpayer a year? What costs that same taxpayer, say, for school sports or for busing? It'd be really interesting to know what those numbers are too, because
That's a great question. I'll give some thought to how we might be able to identify that. I appreciate that.
Representative O'Brien.
Are there other states that do have a universal meal program like Vermont?
We are one of 8 states that have a universal meals program. I will say with Vermont pride that our bill is the best. And in fact, we are sought out by other states because there are still other states looking to pursue this. Because we're a model, we draw down more federal funding than any other state with our bill. We have found the way, and I give a lot of credit to our Agency of Education for this, to make a model that is highly effective. And that's why the cost has gone down, even as we're reaching more and more students. So that's really thanks to the very wise design of that bill, which was hammered out in this committee, in this very room, in 2023. Yeah.
What was the original number? It was like 26?
26 is what I remember.
The
It was
cost.
29 million.
For the state?
Estimate, yeah.
And that's what was actually passed by the legislature in 2023, but it's actually 17.5.
Go ahead.
Just a statement, don't throw shit at me. My father buys Trump hats by the case, and he supports this. And he told me this long before the pandemic, that it should be covered. Long before the pandemic. And I can't tell you that if farmers spoke the truth, how many farm kids would qualify. And they're too proud to do it.
We had, last year, the Agency of Education came in, maybe with you or maybe separately, I'm not sure, maybe with Hunger Free Vermont or maybe on a separate occasion, and shared a report that I think is an annual report or some data anyway. They had, and it was a very positive report last year. I think that we're still waiting on the agency to have this year's version, but I suspect it will be soon. And we'll ask them to come in and give us an update when we have that, because I think that will help complete the picture to see, how many students are involved and how many are being helped.
Yes, we're excited to see that report as well. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
well, thank you, Honora, and we've left a little bit of time to hear from Nova, so if you'd like to come up, yeah. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you all so much for having me. For the record, my name is Kayla Strom. I am the Farm to School Programs Manager at the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont. My work focuses on increasing local foods in schools and early childhood programs while ensuring that these institutional markets work for our Vermont producers as well. So I'm here today to share how Universal School Meals and Farm to School work together to create a win-win, supporting Vermont families, strengthening our local economy, and ensuring that no child in our state is distracted at school by hunger. So I urge you to continue funding Universal School Meals through the Education Fund and to not support the governor's proposed repeal of this important commitment to our students, families, teachers, and school administrators. Feeding our kids is a must in how we fund education. So as a representative from the Vermont Farm to School and Early Childhood Network, I also wanted to share that I'll be back at the State House on February 12th for Farm to School Awareness Day. And at that time, I can share more about the network and some of the grant programs and the local foods incentive, things you might be familiar with. But today I'm going to be focusing on how Universal School Meals and Farm to School work together. So we know that for many students, school meals provide nearly half of their daily nutrition. In Vermont, Farm to School connects food access, education, and local purchasing so that while children receive essential nutrition, they also learn about the impact of food on their health, communities, and local farms. Universal School Meals strengthens the system by increasing meal participation, bringing in more federal dollars, and allowing schools to buy more high-quality and local food, supporting over 100 Vermont farms and keeping more money in our local economy. See? Some statistics. And then this is the virtuous cycle that Honora touched on a little bit. But so farm to school and universal school meals increase participation in school meals, which improves the revenue of the program, and then allowing program directors to be able to purchase more local and then leading to increased participation. So this cycle kind of fuels itself over time. So the impact of universal school meals on Vermont farmers is real. When all students have the opportunity to eat, school nutrition programs thrive. More meals served means bigger food budgets, largely supported with federal dollars through the Universal School Meal Program, which allows schools to shift their purchasing power towards Vermont producers. And every dollar spent on local food generates an additional $1.60 in economic activity for Vermont. And we should be doing everything that we can to be keeping those dollars in our state and putting them in the hands of our farmers. That money ripples out not just to farms, but to local processors, distributors, and rural communities. So last year, schools that reported their local spending to the Agency of Education through the Vermont Local Foods Incentive Program reported 1.2 million spent on Vermont products, food products. So with universal school meals in place, school nutrition programs have been able to shift their focus, moving away from those burdensome administrative tasks like collecting school meal debt, and instead putting time and resources into what really matters, which is serving high quality, locally sourced meals to all students every day. Okay, so Harley Sterling, the food service director at Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union, puts it best when he said that the amount of time that we were spending on free and reduced applications and various administrative tasks that we no longer have to do has allowed us to focus more on the core of our program, which is making tasty, nutritious food for kids. And when meals weren't universal, there was this moral dilemma, knowing that some kids couldn't afford the food, but weren't eligible for free meals. And that moral injury was real. Now our focus is exactly where it should be, on making the best food possible for all of our students. This shift in focus has directly impacted local purchasing. With increased participation and more stable budgets, schools are buying more Vermont-grown food than ever before. Schools typically purchase food in a couple different ways. Many have direct purchasing relationships where they're working directly with a farm to bring in products to their cafeteria. But we've seen a need for more aggregation of local products, and food hubs have really stepped up to meet this demand, growing in number and capacity, helping to strengthen Vermont local supply chains and build a more resilient food system. So this chart shows the steady increase in school sales over the last few years for 4 food hubs, Food Connects, Green Mound Farm Direct, Acorn, and the Vermont Farmers Food Center. And while there are other food hubs and distributors that play essential roles, these 4 have really worked together to ensure that every school in the state has access to locally grown and produced foods. So you can see in school year 21-22, there's about 320,000. The following year, about 100,000 increase, and then last school year up to about $720,000. And so these are aggregate totals of the 4 food hubs together. So programs like the Vermont Local Foods Incentive and the federally funded Local Food for Schools initiative have been instrumental in this growth. However, it is the stability and predictability of universal school meals that allows these programs to have the greatest impact. When all students have the opportunity to eat, schools serve more meals, creating stronger financial foundations for food service programs, and in turn enables them to take full advantage of funding opportunities, invest in high quality ingredients, and build lasting partnerships with Vermont farmers and food producers. So one area of impact where this is especially evident is in sourcing Vermont local beef. Before universal school meals and the local foods incentive, Food Connects reported that selling Vermont-raised proteins to public schools was extremely challenging, primarily due to budget constraints. So now that schools both have financial means and an incentive to prioritize local sourcing, this barrier has been significantly reduced. In fact, in one of the most effective ways for schools to increase their local purchasing is for them to incorporate a center of the plate protein like beef. So Boyden Farm in Cambridge, Vermont is Food Connect's primary beef supplier. In school year 2021-2022, so looking back at this graph, the purple, Food Connect sold approximately $35,000 worth of Boyden farm beef to Vermont public schools. The following year, that number rose to 48,000, which was a 37% increase. And then last year, school sales climbed to over $110,000, which is a 129% increase in local beef sales for this one producer. And this demonstrates not just growth, but the increasing integration of Vermont raised proteins into school meal programs. So far this school year alone, their sales are at 98,000 and they have 5 months left to go. So it's just going up. So this is a clear example about how universal school meals and farm to school initiatives work hand in hand, not only ensuring that students have access to fresh, nourishing food, but also strengthening Vermont's agricultural economy in the process.
Or you sell to schools?
Yeah, it's delivered from the Lemoyle.
Oh, yeah?
Actually,
What's your farm?
Bird's Apple Orchard.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. We work with Kelly. Okay.
Yeah, well, that people, it's Jeff Brin.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, awesome. So this is Jen Hutchinson. She's a food service director at Barry Unified Union School District. And I just want to share some of her words. The fact that we have consistent high participation because of universal school meals means that I can do all of this cool stuff. I have hydroponic units, I do harvest of the month events, I bring in fresh and local ingredients. I get to spend my time on what really matters to students, and it's getting them excited about healthy food instead of processing paperwork to determine which kids get to eat for free and which kids don't. And that shift has meant everything. Oh, there's Jen. I didn't realize she was covered up. So these moments where students learn that eggs on their plate come from the farm down the road or see that beef in their burger was raised in their own community create meaningful connections. When we highlighted eggs and we worked with a local farm, the kids were mesmerized by all the different colored eggs. And when we told them that this was from your buddy's farm right here in town, their faces just lit up. And that connection, that magic is what makes local food so powerful. So how am I doing on time? I have another food service director I'd love to share some words from.
Please do.
Okay. So this is Scott Fay, another food service director up in Essex Westford. So he really underscores the financial impact. So universal school meals have allowed our budgets to grow, and we're able to think more about supporting local producers now than we were a few years ago. I have seen my own program turn on its head for the better. More kids are eating. We are scratch cooking with whole foods. We are processing local foods. They're actually processing local beef into meatballs for their entire district every month. We're purchasing better foods, more fresh fruits and vegetables. The stigma around school meals is gone, and we are focusing entirely on high quality meals. Yet despite all of this progress, school meals continue to be mischaracterized as a driver of educational costs. In reality, as you heard from Manor, Vermont will spend $2.3 billion on education this year, and the state's cost of universal school meals is just $17.5 million. That is less than 1% of the educational fund. It's 1%. So the state's, so to even suggest that we should lower property tax by taking food away from kids is just not the Vermont way. My colleague Carol Kent, the food service director at Mount Mansfield, says that universal school meals is not competing with education, it's fueling education. The state of Vermont made a commitment to families, students, teachers, and school administrators when Act 64 was passed in 2023. And the governor is now proposing to repeal this law and universal school meals with his proposed budget for FY 2026. If accepted, this proposal would mean that school districts would lose one of the most critical programs providing funding and support needed to prioritize local purchasing, undermining progress made in strengthening Vermont's farm-to-school supply chains. Losing universal school meals programs would create financial uncertainty for school nutrition programs, making it harder for them to commit to purchasing from Vermont farmers and producers. This could lead to the decline in farm viability, disrupt established relationships between schools and local suppliers, and reduce access to fresh, nutritious, locally sourced meals for students, completely contradicting the state's investment in a values-driven food system. At its core, Universal School Meals is a cornerstone of equity in Vermont schools. Offering meals to students regardless of income removes barriers that stand in the way of learning. It eliminates stigma, ensures that no child is left out due to bureaucratic hurdles, and creates a more inclusive school environment. When every student has access to nutritious meals, we level the playing field. School meals become a part of the school day, just like textbooks and teachers and technology, and ensuring that every child has access to nutrition they need to thrive. So when we invest in school meals, we are investing in our students, our farms, our local economies, and Universal School Meals is a policy that works for food security, for Vermont farms, and for the success of our students. So I'll be back at the State House on February 12th for Farm to School Awareness Day, where you'll have the opportunity to hear from farmers and school nutrition professionals and students about the impact of these programs. But in the meantime, I'm happy to be a resource and answer any questions, and please don't hesitate to reach out between now and then. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that we have already got you booked, or some folks booked
Yeah.
testimony to hear on Farm to School Day, to hear more about these connections
Yeah,
that are, and this has been helpful just to get sort of an introductory exposure to it and how it relates to Universal School Meals. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Somebody have
What's the budget for the local incentive?
it's $500,000 per year.
We set that, right?
Mhm.
So it has no real connection to our drawdown for Universal School.
No, it does not. No.
Okay. So are they, I know some years they weren't even using it all.
Yeah,
Are
so
you seeing now it getting much closer to being?
there's a trajectory of growth for sure, and it takes a long time for food service directors to put these systems in place. Like they're already thinking about orders for next year today. So to put that in perspective, I think this year, this past December, they had their grants open, and I think we're probably closer to 400,000 of that allocation this year, probably a little bit more. So yeah, we're getting closer to that 500,000. We also want that 500,000. We want the grants to be available for those who applied as well. So
Jennifer.
How is it decided what amount to do for local purchasing versus the rest of their cafeteria budget?
yeah, so I mean, we strive to support schools and increasing their local purchasing, and the local purchasing incentive has some tiers. 15% of their budgets gets them 15 cents back per lunch served. And then 20% of their budget locally gets 20 cents back per lunch served, and 25%. So there's like a 15, 20, and 25% tier for the incentive program.
Those decisions are all local. They're all
Yeah,
local. The tier, we decide the tiers.
yep.
But they,
Yeah, I mean, so it's by choice for a school food authority to apply to this program. It's not mandated in any way. But there is a financial incentive for them to participate. And it mostly aligns with a lot of values that we're seeing in school meal programs.
okay. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
both of you. And there's very compelling testimony and data and stories. And I know we're, at the end of the day, we're looking at budgets, which are numbers, but it's really helpful to have the stories, behind the numbers. Thank you. We will take a break. I'm sorry, we're running a few minutes late, but we'll be back in 10 minutes for our next